US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has just wrapped up a trip to the Middle East, the first high-level US diplomatic mission to the region since Washington signed a memorandum of understanding with Tehran last week. Gulf nations were thrust onto the front lines of the US-Israeli war against Iran and bore the brunt of Iranian attacks. Those countries are now expressing concern about the peace deal currently being negotiated and its likely impacts on them. Speaking in Bahrain today, Secretary Rubio said the US wanted a deal with Iran, but not at any price. And he assured US partners and allies in the Gulf that regional security would be a top priority in any agreement with Iran.
And the message that I come with is that we want to ensure that in any decisions that are made throughout this negotiating process, the interests of our partners and our allies in the region are always taken into account. That there is no part of this deal that's undertaken that in any way undermines the security, the stability, or the prosperity of any of our partners in the Gulf region.
Well, let's explore the Secretary of State's tour of the Gulf with Gordon Robison, who's a journalist and Middle East analyst who lived and worked in the region for many years. Welcome back to DW. This seems like a peculiar way to conduct diplomacy. You start a war with a regional irritant without consulting your allies in that region. Then you do a deal with the irritant, also without consultation, and only then you tell your allies that their interests are being taken into account. This is odd.
Well, yes, I think it's fair to say that's not how they teach it at the Academy of Diplomacy. The clip we just heard, I think the Gulf states will be very glad to hear what Rubio just said. The problem is it kind of flies against what actually happened. He says, we're not going to do anything that doesn't take your interests into account. Well, they wouldn't have started the war if they were taking the Gulf states' interests into account. And the people in Kuwait and in Dubai in particular have been hit repeatedly. Also Doha, where I was living until just a couple of months ago. People are very freaked out, and I can see that he's trying to reassure them. It'll be interesting to see whether it actually works.
Well, I was going to say that was my next question. What sort of hearing has he had? Presumably they've been all very deferential and polite, but sceptical?
I think that's a fair way of putting it. On the other hand, they all need to buy a lot of weapons from the United States now to replace what they've shot off during the war. Now, the Trump administration is going to be very happy about that, very happy to sell billions and billions of dollars of weapons to the Gulf states. But there are a couple of problems with that. The first one is that the United States itself has also shot off a lot of munitions during the war, and what the military people call reset can only go at a certain speed. So whether the Gulf states can get what they feel they need on the timetable they want it is going to be an issue. But the other thing is that this has highlighted the dependence of the Gulf states on the U.S. In many ways, the U.S. has shown itself to be an unreliable partner, but also the only partner they've got. It's not like the Chinese are going to sell them weapons to replace what they've shot off. It's not like Europe is in any hurry to do that. So the Gulf states have been in a very delicate position where I think they've lost a lot of faith in the U.S. over the last 3 months, but it's also reinforced the degree to which they are dependent on the U.S.
OK, we may well come back to that. First, though, I'd like to pick through some of the bits of this memorandum of understanding as we understand it. And we'll start with the Gulf of Hormuz. One of the Gulf countries' biggest concerns will be Iran's determination to levy passage fees on that. We'll hear from Marco Rubio on that and then come back to you.
You can call it a toll, you can call it a fee. Whatever you want to call it, it's a game of semantics. The reality of it is that no country on earth has a right to charge for the use of international waterways. And that will never be an acceptable condition of any deal. The president's been fundamentally clear about that.
So, Gordon Robison, OK, reassuring words there from Marco Rubio, but what's the US prepared to do to back up those reassuring words?
Well, that's the big question. Trump has said on numerous occasions that he doesn't really care that much about the Strait of Hormuz because much of what goes through it isn't coming to the US. Now, I think that is a naive approach to this. The world oil market is a global market, so even though the tankers may be headed to Asia or to Africa, that doesn't mean that this doesn't affect the U.S., as Americans have been discovering whenever they put gas, petrol into their cars. But but it's also clear that the U.S. is not willing to ramp the war back up to open the strait. I mean, it's hardly a novel observation at this point, but this is a gigantic mess, almost entirely of the Americans' making. And Rubio has been sent to the Gulf to try to clean things up, but whether that's even doable in the short term is open to debate.
So, do those Gulf states have no option then, but to just take him at his word and cross their fingers?
Pretty much. I mean, the shipping things out not via the Gulf, pipelines across Saudi Arabia, pipelines across the UAE that go to the Gulf of Oman, only carry limited capacity. And that's no good at all for things that aren't oil but leave the Gulf in very large volumes, liquefied natural gas, fertilizer, stuff like that. You can't pump fertilizer through a pipeline across Saudi Arabia. So they kind of have to take him at his word. I suspect that behind the scenes, what they were looking for was some assurance that the Americans really are serious about this and that they really do take the Gulf concerns seriously, because nobody on the Arab side of the Gulf is very happy with that memorandum of understanding.
Okay, let's talk more about their concerns with this memorandum of understanding. So, Strait of Hormuz is one. What are the other major concerns?
Iran's ballistic missile program and the fact that essentially nothing is done to limit it. I think they are concerned about the Iranian nuclear program, maybe not as concerned as the Israelis are, but it's certainly a matter of some concern to them. They also wonder if the Americans are really going to lift sanctions on Iran, because as long as the sanctions are in place, or at least largely in place, the Iranians will have an excuse to lash out. And as we've seen, when they lash out, that mostly means they lash out at Kuwait or the Emirates or Qatar or Saudi Arabia.
Which brings us back to the point you made, that they're sort of sitting there with depleted stocks of ammunition, no re-up from the United States, and the United States as a dubious at best partner in the region. This all looks fraught for them.
Yes, and I would add on top of all that, and looking at, in some cases, years to repair the damage that's already been done. Qatar's main LNG plant at Ras Laffan, north of Doha, has had its capacity reduced by, I think it's 20 or 25%. That's a lot. That's one of the biggest liquefied natural gas plants in the world. And the Qataris say it's going to take 2 years to replace the damage. And of course, that assumes that in those 2 years, things don't flare back up.
But again, this all sounds bad and worse. I don't see any benefit to the Gulf of these warm words from Marco Rubio, because this seems like a White House that will do what it likes when it likes, regardless of what it has said in the past. And now we have a Secretary of State trying to pacify a group of countries who have been bombed in a war that the United States started, and a Secretary of State who has not been involved in the negotiations to bring about whatever is on that memorandum of understanding.
Well, that's the problem in a nutshell. And yes, you've just touched on another issue. If I were the King of Saudi Arabia or the Emir of Bahrain or the Emir of Qatar, I probably wouldn't say publicly, but I might be thinking, Rubio hasn't been involved in any of these talks. He seems to have even avoided being involved in the talks. So should we accept his assurances? But the thing is, they don't really have any other option.
No other game in town.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about then Rubio's role in all of this. Why has he been excluded from this important area of US foreign relations?
Well, whether he's been excluded or not is a bit of a Washington parlor game. On one hand, you could look at it as he's been excluded. You could also look at it as he's very skillfully avoided getting involved in this mess. Now, I don't pretend to know the inner workings of the administration and which of those is true, but they're both kind of equally plausible.
Okay. So there's that as well. And so he's happy, you would guess, to let Vance take the weight of the political burden on this.
Oh, yeah. I think almost anyone in the administration is happy to let Vance take the weight of the political burden on this. Even Trump publicly said, if this, with Vance standing beside him, if this fails, I'm going to blame you.
Okay, so this has all been just a gigantic PR exercise where everybody knows the outcome. Everyone knows that we'll pose together for a photo, but no one will believe any American assurances, but there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, the one part of that I would take issue with is that everybody knows the outcome. It has been a gigantic PR exercise, but I think we don't really know what the outcome is because we don't know how durable this MOU is going to be. The Israelis sometimes cooperate with the Americans, other times don't. The degree to which the Iranians themselves can control their proxies in Lebanon is subject to debate. So, no, I don't think we really know where we're going with all of this at all. The one thing that I think everyone can and should take some solace from is there's a lot of exhaustion on both sides. But the Americans and the Iranians are both talking a big game, but everybody wants this to end. The question is, can it be ended on terms that are somewhat acceptable to everyone involved?
As ever, good talking to you. Thank you so much for coming in. Middle East analyst Gordon Robinson. Thank you.